I think when it comes to 3DO, they're always been known as the guys who brought out the 3DO system and some other titles like the Army Men series. But for this video, I'll be taking a look at most of the Army Men Sarge's games. The only unfortunate part is that I'm not including the portable titles, as that'll be like another series that I may be making if I get around to playing those ones. And I'm not counting the original Army Men games, as this is the Sarge's universe, which it has to be that takes place in the Sarge's universe. It's pretty easy to tell which ones are the Sarge's universe titles of the game. So, with that being said, I think we should take a look at every single one of those games that I've actually gotten the chance to play. So the first one in the Army Men series, well, the Sarge's series I should say, is Army Men Sarge's Heroes. The game first came out on Nintendo 64, then PS1 and PC, and then got a port from Sapphire, who actually made the Rainbow Six game for Nintendo 64, and then ported the Rogue Spear version to the PS1, which both ports actually did pretty well for those sort of systems. Now, the story behind this game is that you're playing as Sarge, and Plastro, who's part of the Tan Army, decides to set an ambush to your base, and he wants to make some sort of evil plan to take you down. Yes, and he even says evil, so he's not misunderstood or anything. He wants to be evil for some reason. But anyways, you play as Sarge, and you got sort of different weapons and sort of stuff that you can use. So you got the assault rifle, you got the shotgun, the machine gun, you also got the mine detector to find mines, and you also got yourself some grenades and such. Now, the only thing that I've played before is the Nintendo 64 version, but I did play a little bit of the PS1 version, and let's just say the PS1 version is not that great. It looks like another one of those rushed Army Men game that you would just get on the PS1, like, you know, World War series that you've all probably seen and probably heard of, that probably didn't do well in reviews. They made slight improvements, but that's whatever. That's for a different topic. But anyways, Sarge's Heroes on Nintendo 64 actually is pretty well made for the game, and it has to be one of the best looking games on Nintendo 64 out there. It's got the plastic-y type looking toys, which, let's be honest, they actually are plastic. I've actually grown up having some of those things back then. I'm pretty sure everyone else has been as well. So, like I said before, there's also a Dreamcast version of this game, which is actually it's just the Nintendo 64 version, but with improved controls and graphics. But I will say the explosions on the Dreamcast version look weak. But that's like the downside of things, but it's whatever. You got missions to do in this game, but the thing is, some of these missions happen to be pretty long, and there are no checkpoints in the game whatsoever, so you have to make your strategies and every shot count. So yeah, you'll have to be careful in this one. If anyone of your allies die, game's over. If you die, game's over. If you fail to do any sort of objective, well, it's probably going to be game over for you guys. But sometimes when you guys play the game, what's strange is that some enemies come out straight up nowhere and just kill you with a flamethrower within seconds. So that's kind of like why it's also on the difficult side of things. Yes, this game can be difficult on some sort of things, but even on easy mode, it's still difficult. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's the difficult balancing or whatever. But anyways, you do have to look around for ammo for some of your weapons, otherwise you won't be completing your objectives. I always find it useful for the assault rifle because, let's be honest, almost every weapon in the game does the same set damage. But I do use weapons occasionally, like the grenade launcher and rocket launchers against tanks and vehicles. I also use the machine gun in case there's too many enemies for me to handle. And a sniper rifle in case if I want to shoot from far distance. You also got those med kits you gotta be smart on using, otherwise, well, it's whatever. But it does give you a full health when you use it, so that's a good thing about that thing. But again, I think Nintendo 64 or the Dreamcast version is the best way to play it. You know, I watched a review of this game that's saying the Nintendo 64 version is unplayable, yet I probably played the game for like 1 minute straight, because evidently it only showed the boot camp scene, that was it. How funny is that? Anyways, let's move on to the next game. And then the following year, we would get a sequel of Army Man Sarge's Heroes 2 for Nintendo 64 first, and then it got a PS1 and PS2 release, along with a Game Boy Color version, which is a completely different game, by the way, the Game Boy Color version, if you want to know what I mean by that. So anyways, I did the same exact same thing before. Played Nintendo 64 version first and see how it is. So, Nintendo 64 version has one exclusive level that was taken away from the PS1 and PS2 version for some reason being. But anyways, again, you play as Sarge in this one, but you also play as his love interest, Vicky. So what's interesting about this one is that it's got brand new stuff for the game. What I mean by that, well, it's got brand new things called abilities, or at least power-ups, I should say. So anyways, for this one, you can use some weapon abilities, such as, well, you can double the damage in some weapons, and if you have a grenade launcher, you can shoot 3 grenades at once. I'm not making this up. Which I think is pretty helpful in some cases, in case you guys need to go against sort of things like tanks. Because tanks, they take out more than one grenade launcher hits to hit them or whatever. But anyways, I have to say, there's also power-ups where you can use your armor. Yeah, you can use armor in this one to protect yourself from enemies, from getting some damage. But anyways, this one, I should mention that both this and the first game has the expansion pack. But for some reason, the Nintendo 64 version of the second game, when using an expansion pack, can have frame rate issues. But it's not to where it's unplayable, but it can be hard at times. But it's supposed to increase the resolution of the game, but whatever. Anyways, the assault rifle now has infinite ammo, but there's a cooldown system to it. Now, as far as I can tell, there's one new weapon in the game, and that's the crossbow, but that's only if you play as Vicky. Now, the positive note about this game is that the levels are a lot shorter than the first game, and that's something they got right with this one. Now, instead of ranging from probably like 5 minutes of a mission to do, or maybe 10 minutes depending of the situation, you guys could get it done within like a minute or 3 minutes in some cases. Which again, they're pretty easy to play, but the one thing I should note is that the PS1 version, it's actually a better game. Well, not in terms of performance or anything, but it's better than the first game on the PS1, which they got right. The graphics, controls, everything. That's something I should mention too, is that the game has improved controls, so now there won't be any more complaints about it. So anyways, for this game, you also have exclusive objectives, I gotta say, for the PS2 version, which also has amped up graphics, but it can be a little bit more harder than the Nintendo 64 and PS1 version. But the negative thing about the PS1 version is that the audio can be too loud for certain weapons, and that's the bad thing about it. But anyways, I think what you find is another great game and a great sequel. But again, instead of it being dark like the first game, it's lighthearted. But the story goes is that the Blue Spy went up to revive Plastro after being frozen in the human world. And you'll find out how soon enough. And that's funny, by the way. So the next game in this series is Army Men Air Attack for PS1, and then later on Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy Color as Army Men Air Combat. And I gotta say, this game is a lot of fun to play. So, I don't think it doesn't matter which version you guys can play in this one. As long as you're having fun, I say you should go get it. So, you play as one of the Green Army as a chopper pilot, and you're shooting down enemies such as tanks, soldiers, and bases, and more. So, you've been given different sort of objectives to do in these sort of things. You also get some power-ups. Well, not really power-ups, but you get homing missiles, you get grenades, and you also get some sidekicks. Now, depending on which sidekick, they actually have their own unique items, so that makes it exclusive. So, you gotta read down each thing carefully, and then once you choose the right thing that fits your experience, then you can go and take that person. You can send down suicidal soldiers, you can send down anything like that. There's also blue spies out there, which have their own hidden items, so you gotta make sure you shoot them as well if you want to grab some items that may heal you and all that as well. So yeah, all I can really say is that there's a bunch of missions for you to play, and yeah, there's also some choppers you guys can even choose. Each have their own stats, like their weaknesses in terms of speed and armor protection, and anything else like that. So that's all I can say. They have their own different choppers, and it's not like the same chopper over and over. They all have different sort of models as well. So no matter what, I think you'll find something good in this game, both Nintendo 64 and PS1. But I don't know, Nintendo 64 seems to have a better experience in terms of controls. But I will say the music on the Nintendo 64 version is completely different than the PS1 version. And then when we get a sequel, Army Men Air Attack 2, or otherwise known on the GameCube side of things, Army Men Air Combat Elite Missions. So this one on the PS1 version has to be the most definitive way to play it. Now, listen, here's the reason why I'm saying this. For some odd reason, they cut off 2 missions on the re-release versions of the PS2 and GameCube version. Don't know why they did that, but that's what they did. So this time, you're going against some sort of Baron, and he has a shield that protects him for all these attacks. Yeah, imagine going against a Baron who has a force shield and you can't even see a thing. But anyways, so this one has a lot of improvements in terms of gameplay. You have new abilities, which can give you upgraded guns. So you upgrade once, you shoot 2 turrets. You get another one, and then you can upgrade to 3 turrets. So that's like one of those upgrades you can get. Side Blaze is the same thing, items are all the same thing, but the gameplay is still intense and fun. It can be difficult at times as well. So I'm going to leave this short in saying that the PS1 version is the best way to play it of all things, because it has over 20 missions, unlike the GameCube and PS2 version. Sure, the graphics may look a little better on the PS2 and GameCube versions, but I do recommend the PS1 version if you guys want to play a lot more missions than the ones on PS2 and GameCube. Again, 2 missions were cut off the game for some reason. Army Men Green Rogue is considered the weakest in this series for obvious reasons. Now, here's the story of this one. The Green Army Men are actually creating a super soldier, and what happens is that they took their own samples of blood and put it onto a new body. So the prototype, or a super soldier, whatever it is, crashes down, and you're guided by a mysterious voice. What's strange about this is that you have the Army Men Green soldiers' memories like Sarge's and all that. And essentially this game's gameplay, well, it's arcadey at best, but think of Contra, but you have a coat of green paint and you splat over it, and this is the result. Nobody likes this game for obvious reasons. Now, the frame rate can be terrible at times, and enemy placements are questionable at best. And the balancing of the game just makes no sense whatsoever, including the enemy positions. And don't get me started on the PS1 version, because that one's worse than you think. It has terrible frame rate. Sure, it's cheap to get, but it's still terrible to play. I don't recommend it at all, and I think it's best you guys avoid this, as plenty of people consider this game as one of the worst games of all time, and I don't blame them for saying that. Because as soon as I tried the game, yeah, I can see how bad it is. I mean, they were trying to do something new, I'll give them that, but they poorly executed it. Now, this is another game from the Sarge's universe, and this is Portal Runner. No Army Men name tag, by the way. You play as Vicky, obviously, and your weapon is a bow and arrow. You go to place after place, and you take down enemies like Gingerbread Men and all these other sort of enemies. You collect gems as well, which is interesting. The more gems you get, the higher your score is. I think it's just another arcade type of game, but again, it's not a bad one as Green Rogue, which came out exclusively on the PS2. Now, this game got into a lot of trouble in terms of controversy. Now, it's not that it's the in-game content or anything, but it's what happened outside of the game. See, GamePro gave the game a 2.3 out of 10, saying it looks like a last-gen PS1 game. So, the president at the time of 3DO got angry, so he wrote an angry letter to the president of GamePro, complaining about them being the highest advertisers, and they will threaten to pull it off, and saying that there's nothing wrong with the game, it's but the reviewers. Technically, they're saying, if you don't like my game, there's something wrong with you. Yeah, I wonder which other company learned that a bunch of years later. Oh yeah, what's interesting is that, in case you're wondering what I'm talking about, is EA, and obviously, the person who first founded EA obviously founded 3DO as well, which I think is quite funny to say the least. But anyways, I don't think this is a bad game, but yeah, I should mention that email that it was sent, posted all over of the internet just to see. Yeah, make yourself look bad as usual, Mr. President. Make yourself look bad as usual. Before we wrap up the final game in the series, we're going to be talking about RTS, Real-Time Strategy. This is a game on the PC, PS2, and then the GameCube. This is made by Pandemic Studios, believe it or not, who went on to develop games like Star Wars Battlefront games, the Destroy All Humans series, Mercenaries, and Full Spectrum Warrior games, and others such as well. And basically, this is not a bad strategy game. So technically, you're in the human world, and you come out of a bucket, and you've already made your camp. I don't know why the human just bother leaving all the toys outside in the first place. Maybe for the ants? I don't know. But I find it strange. But they're going against the Tan army as usual. So, you can build yourself a base, a spawner, which you can spawn your own allies, and you go against other enemies in the game. You also have Sarge, so yes, he is technically a playable character in the game, along with your own commanding soldiers. And look, if Sarge does die in the game, it doesn't mean it's game over. As long as you have a good squad, you should be able to get everything done. I do think this is a good game to pick up on Steam for a cheap price, because right now, it's the cheapest to get. I know it's also on the GameCube and that, but the PC version is the recommendation, I would say, for the best. But what's interesting on the PS2 version, the game makes fun of you for pressing the select button because it does nothing. So yeah, if you guys are thinking about a real-time strategy game to pick up, I say you should get this one. So the final game in the series for the home console portion is Sarge's War. By the way, this game is backwards compatible in Xbox 360, just so you guys know that ahead of time. So, for this game, you play as Sarge once again, except it's a lot darker than usual. So, in Sarge's War, well, first off, the game came out on PC, Xbox, Europe only on PS2, and North America only on the GameCube. Now, instead of 3DO making the game, it was made by Tactical Development. Now, originally 3DO was going to publish this game, but they filed for bankruptcy, so Global Star Software bought the rights to the game. So, like I said before, you play as Sarge, but all your beloved characters are dead except for Sarge. Oh, including Plastro, so you won't be seeing his face. So anyways, new voice actors this time, not the same first or two people over again, despite how talented they all sound. But anyways, so this one, they made some quite nice improvements in terms of difficulty and gameplay wise. Now, when it comes to weapons, you have a lock-on system where you can lock on the enemies. So, for this one, with lock-on, if it's red, you're likely going to miss. If it's yellow, you have a 50% chance. And if it's green, you're definitely going to hit the enemies. You got different types of weapons. You have the carbine weapon, which has infinite ammo, but it doesn't do that great in terms of things. It's a single action weapon. So anyways, there's also the assault rifle, shotgun, missile launcher, and your usual stuff. But anyways, there's also tanks. Yes, tanks are back, but they do have a weak point this time. That's gas canisters, so that's good. So anyways, the game also can be fast-paced as well. And the good part of the thing is that it also has checkpoints. Yes, for once in our lives, we got checkpoints for this game. Not only you got your primary objectives, but you also have optional secondary objectives, like finding a file of the plans of what the Tan army are up to, and capturing flags or whatever. And also in this game, well, you're going against a new villain, and he's out for revenge or something, I guess. That's what this whole story is supposed to be. So, anyways, his name is Malice. Yeah, that's the name of the villain you'll be facing. Anyways, so this game also has lots and lots of load screens every time you leave an area to go to a new area. But again, you do get some checkpoints, so that's cool. You have to find ammo, health kits, and all those other things like that. Again, if you guys have played Sarge's Heroes 1 and 2, you'll get the idea of how they work. But anyways, I think this is one of the most fun games I've ever played. You even will have missions in the game, like finding dynamite and blowing something up, and it'll be a factory, and there's even some time limits depending of where you're at. And you better hurry, because if you don't hurry and figure something out, well, you're done for. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But anyways, after this game came out, well, of course we would get 2 more Army Men games. One was Major Malfunction, which flopped, even though it was made by the guys who made Worms, known as Team 17, which I can see why it flopped in terms of reviews. And then we got Soldiers of Misfortune for Nintendo Wii and PS2 and DS. And that game does not look like an Army Man game. That is all I will say about that one. So, I think the conclusion I can say is that despite the game no longer being made, but even though 2K has the rights to them because they re-released those games on Steam, well, not the Sarge's Heroes, unfortunately, except for real-time strategy. There's also World War that's re-released on PC, but that's only on GOG for some reason. But despite the game stopping from being made, people are still making these little action figure movies on YouTube and Newgrounds and such. But anyways, I think that's the conclusion I can say about this. So, whichever one you guys want to start first, I say Sarge's Heroes just to get familiar with the game. But again, Nintendo 64 or Dreamcast versions are the best way to start. That's all I'm going to say about that. See ya.